Welcome to the live stream, you magnificent bastards. This is an exciting day.
It is.
Yeah. We have some very interesting guests. We're going to have a really good conversation, and we're going to make sure that we have plenty of time for you guys to ask your questions. But Daniel, who do we have with us?
Oh, just some interesting human beings currently in other parts of the world. We got Greg Swartz and Adam Hannett.
Yes. Now, Adam, he is currently the head distiller of just a little no-name distillery up in Scotland. I don't know.
Lick. Oh, turn your...
I'm watching you guys. And then, of course, we have the Greg Swartz, the director of The Water of Life, a whiskey film. This is a documentary that you and I have both watched. We really enjoyed. Beautifully shot. And it tells a really interesting story about the state of Scotch, how we got here with Scotch. And my takeaway was it's like a love letter to Scotch told through the lens of Bruichladdich. There's a lot of Bruichladdich in there.
Yeah, it really is. It really is an accidental love letter to Bruichladdich.
Accidental or not,
as a discussion of the entire
accidental or not, we will find out. Let's get our guests in here. Let's get Adam and Greg. Guys, how are you doing?
Very good, thanks, boys. Very good indeed. Thanks for having us. It's worth staying up for to come on be on the show, you guys, and cracking pronunciation of Bruichladdich there as well. I must say, good. I love the collection of whiskey on the front.
I don't think we've ever been told that we pronounce something correctly.
No, we're best at pronunciations.
Yeah, pronunciations.
Yeah.
And Greg, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and do a little day drinking.
Yeah, well, and you're in the place for it. You took a little break from your vacation. You're up in a lake on the shore of a lake in New York there, and then you're going to go back to some more day drinking after this. But guys, I think first things first, we gotta get a pour.
Well, I already
started. What?
Well, you were.
Does everybody else have a whiskey? Am I the only one without a whiskey? Damn it!
I brought you the port. The tin right there.
So, what's going to be the most appropriate pour for this conversation? What are we looking at here?
I think we've got to go classic, haven't we? Bruichladdich classic.
Sure.
I mean, I've been well prepared. I have the classic and I have a little Port Charlotte here for after. So
that was just a Port Charlotte, but I'm going to switch over to the classic.
Right on. So let's start with. Oh, you want some too? I don't pour. I drink. You pour. So let's talk about the Water of Life. Greg, how did this project even come about? How did it begin? What was the goal? What was the intent? Yeah, walk us through that. What is the Water of Life?
Well, the funny thing is it didn't begin anywhere near Isla. It actually began in mainland Scotland. I was an exchange student in Scotland years ago in college, and my wife had never been. And so for our 10th anniversary, I went back. And we did the Dufton Whiskey Walk, which is a 4-mile hike in and around the distilleries of Dufton. And it was the cool thing about that walk, if anyone's ever done it, is it's not an official thing. You don't go into the distilleries. She leads you through and has a backpack full of whiskey, and she just gives you a dram of each in the parking lots of them and tells you a little about the history of them. And which is cool because they
don't even know she's there.
Yeah. Then they run you off. A guy comes out with a cattle prod and chases you off the land. But it was during that walk that I started thinking about this. It was actually right outside of Glenfiddich that the idea started coming. And the film, I got back to LA and it took my business partner and producer as also my next door neighbor. And so I took a bunch of whiskey back with me and we sat drinking the whiskey and started kind of hashing out an idea for a story and the film we wanted to do. And then I went to our cinematographer's house and he and I started doing a lot of research and we started feeling like, okay, we really wanted a story that was about great whiskey, but also a great story. And that was important to us. And it was apparent very quickly that Bruichladdich had ticked both of those boxes.
Yeah, it is a super interesting story. And there's a lot of background and context, not only about the distillery, but also just, the broader scope of Scotch and how we got to where we are with Scotch. But really quick, Adam, you are a fairly recent head distiller over at Bruichladdich. Is that just, I have no idea what to even I have no idea what that would be like to try and step into that legendary of a distillery and those shoes. I mean, like, paint me a picture, man. Are you just on pins and needles every waking hour? Have you just eased into it effortlessly over your time there?
I wouldn't say eased into it effortlessly. I think after 6 years now, I'm maybe starting to relax into it a little bit. But
okay, only 6 years.
Yeah, it only took about 6 years. Yeah, it's not long. But no, I mean, taking over from Jim McEwen, whiskey legend.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt the pressure, and he obviously knew I would feel the pressure, so he would say things to me, be your own man, do your own thing. But how do you follow somebody like that? Luckily, it's more than just me. There's a great team of people here as well. A fantastic team of people. We're all pulling in the same direction. And I think that's the success of Bruichladdich. It's the people. It's the team behind us making the whiskey. Rolling barrels, mashing, distilling, the whole package. Bottling, the whole thing. So, it's good. I think that we've, for myself, I've been kind of steeped in making whiskey at Bruichladdich. It's my kind of only experience of making whiskey is here in the style we do. Jim with Duncan, the guys who've been working here for years. I think it's continuing the legacy. I think you always feel like you're part of something. You always feel taking it forward in the future. It's about looking ahead all the time. So yeah, you've always got something else to think about, which is great.
Well, go ahead.
There's a really cool contrast in the film between showing the history of whiskey and like the legacy and the history and the traditions, and then contrasting that with Bruichladdich honoring, embracing, and using all those traditions, but also not being afraid to just try a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And sort of one of the forerunners of really getting creative with things, at least that consumers can drink. We don't often get to know what people are doing in the background. But what is that like in the gatherings in the Scottish industry on your side? You guys are in all of those different ability to try things and test things and less handcuffs, shall we say, not as much tied to execution of the same thing over and over. Does it feel that way?
Oh, for sure. For us, I think that's the DNA of the distillery since it reopened. Is about trying new things. It's about making peated whiskey. It's about making unpeated whiskey. It's about triple distilling, quadruple distilling. It's about making gin. It's about sustainable agriculture. It's so many different things that if we just did the same thing and repeated and looked at the history in the past, we tell the same old story. It's really boring for us to make whiskey that way. But it's actually really exciting even looking behind me, there's a break of different expressions there, and we get freedom to create and try different things. And whiskey's all about tastes and flavors, and sure, there's tradition and history. You've got to look forward, and that's what keeps us inspired. That's what keeps us interested in making whiskey. There's one of the great things we started doing is making rye whiskey. We started, so there's always new things to try, and that's part of a great sustainability and agricultural kind of focus that we have. So
from the marketing side of things, what I've been most impressed about on Bruichladdich as we watch everything that comes out in the last decade was how you were able to segment your creative choices into ways that made it easy as a consumer to develop expectations. So it wasn't just like, well, this is Bruichladdich, and then sometimes it was heavily peated, and sometimes it was almost barbecue, and sometimes it had no peat, and you were just sort of didn't know what to do. But instead there was, here's the line if you like this version of Bruichladdich. Here's things if you like to explore this direction. Yeah. You've got black art. You've got Port Charlotte lines.
Well,
go ahead.
One of the things that you and I both really appreciate, because whenever we look at Scotland and their whiskey tradition, we think, man, to have that much history and heritage and just a mountain of expectation and legacy to live up to. Wow, that's a tremendous amount of pressure. You know what works, you know what's beloved. To just keep going back to that well, it's so enticing. Just keep doing what you know is going to be successful and popular. But Bruichladdich, you guys are continuing to innovate while at the same time nodding to the things that are worth honoring from the past, but not afraid to color outside the lines as you go into the future.
Yeah, here's my question on that, because that's brilliant marketing to be able to create basically lines of product that you can develop. Mm-hmm. But how soon in the production process do those discussions start for you, where you're like, okay, this weird new experiment we're going to do, where will this land?
That's a good question. And to be fair, when you talk about the Bruichladdich range from peated, Port Charlotte heavily peated, Octomore super heavily peated, and then the different expressions looking at different things like Isla barley or Hannett, Bear barley, Black Art, whatever it may be in those ranges. That's taken quite a long time to that took us 10 years to kind of get to that stage where we had that thing. And that was just through trial and kind of experimentation to settle on that. So it took a long time because no one had done really that before. So we were kind of doing it ourselves, we didn't have a blueprint to follow. When we're doing new things, for example, I mentioned, we use that as an example. We haven't bottled any of that. We're not at that point. We still don't know what is it, it's not a malt whiskey. It's a single grain whiskey, but it's this whole new kind of category, a whole new thing we go in. So it's going to take us a little while to figure out, what we call that, what we do with that. But it'll land in there somewhere. It'll be part of the Bruichladdich range. It'll, we know it's coming from Bruichladdich, but it may be a whole new, like a fifth brand kind of thing in what we do. So, it's interesting, but we've always got that freedom. We've always got that ability to kind of see what suits us, and we make rules.
So you don't have like somebody on the marketing side every time you come up with some new experiment, you're like, hey, guess what I just did? And they're like, oh, what? What are we going to do with that?
Yeah. That's a regular thing, when we don't know those things. So, but that's half the fun of it, though, isn't it? That's half the fun,
absolutely.
Just because you haven't got a box to put it in doesn't mean you shouldn't create it.
Exactly. But speaking of living up to expectations, Greg, as you went into this project, what was your vision for the documentary, and did it fall exactly in line with what you were trying to accomplish, or was it just kind of a learning experience and you were having the conversations and it evolved as you produced this Water of Life?
That's a good question, because we kind of reverse engineered it. We knew what we didn't want to make. There's a film that was made a number of years ago called Scotch, The Story of Whisky, with a Scottish actor named David Heyman, who does a tour around the world. And I think it's very good. I really enjoyed it. It's a 3-part, 3-hour thing. I think it's on Amazon Prime here in the US. It was on the BBC in Britain. But that had been done. Each week they went to a different distillery, and here they learned about wood, and here they learned about copper, and here they learned about barley. And, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted to tell a story. The secret sauce for us was the movie's not really about whiskey. It's about people. But that felt so, when we kind of stumbled into the Bruichladdich story, and I already drank Bruichladdich at that point, but I didn't know as much about it. We're like, oh, well, that's what they do. They sort of put the personalities forward, not in a marketing way, but in a sort of there's a creative freedom and stuff, and we really responded to that. We wanted to sort of do something like the Chef's Table has done with chefs, where they're sort of celebrating the craft by putting the person and the personality in the context of the story.
Which you captured in Waterford, and what we encountered at Waterford was exactly that kind of a thing.
Yeah, for sure. And we knew we were on to, a really good story right away. And to be honest with you, though, we shot a lot of footage at different distilleries. We didn't use it all.
Yeah, that's going to be a question of mine. Hold on to that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a tough decision, but but we just knew what really popped on screen. And look, let's face it. We knew going in that Jim McEwan popped on screen. We knew Jim. We knew who he was. He's all over. You can find hundreds of videos of Jim being Jim, and that's this.
So that part was really quick for the 4 people who are tuning in and they don't know who Jim McEwan is. Just give us the Reader's Digest version. Who is he, and why is he such an icon in Scotch?
You asking me, or are you asking Adam?
Whoever wants to try and tackle that one, man.
Good luck.
Go for it.
Jim is the former production director and master distiller at Bruichladdich, who is but that is so reductive. He's so much bigger than that. It became, over the course of, I think, 52 years now, started out as a cooper, started out as an apprentice cooper, became a cooper at Bowmore, wound up running Bowmore, leaving Bowmore in his 50s. Because the nutshell version of that is that he didn't have he wanted to do creative things and really explore what he could do, and didn't have that opportunity because Bowmore is a very, very old distillery and, has a way of doing things. And this was an opportunity to go off the rails, and he did in spectacular fashion. And I think of all the big sort of outspoken whiskey personalities who became as well known for the sort of their personality as for their whiskey. I think Jim was sort of clearly one of the 2 or 3 first ones of that to do that.
Yeah.
And only during these last few months for our film did it dawn on me, and I've told him this a number of times, if Jim had no personality at all, he'd still be a great whiskey maker. Like, those two things aren't the same. Yeah. He just happens to have the sort of 1-2 punch, you know?
Yep.
He could be a completely shy, retiring librarian, and he'd still be a master whiskey maker.
Well, that was one of the most fun parts for me about this angle, looking at the world of Scotch, because again, you know, I think a lot of people outside of Scotland, they look into the country and like there's just so much tradition and history there. But for so much of the focus of the Water of Life being on creativity and innovation and pushing the envelope, you know, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to, you know, stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us to continue to make, you know, glorious whiskey. But what else can we do that hasn't been done before? Now, there's a code, I believe, for the people in the live stream that want to get a nice discount if they want to check out the Water of Life. Dan, is that, there you go.
Oh, it's on the screen. Nice.
Kung Fu is the code. Very nice.
I got to tell you, I came up with the password.
Yeah.
Everybody was.
Yeah. Probably we should have introduced you. You are, you know, an MB in the whiskey tribe. You are quite familiar with the lore and the memes, so respect. So the main thing that I think I walked away with is a newfound respect for the broader area of Scotch and Scotch makers, and they aren't necessarily just resting on their laurels. In the documentary, it focuses on Bruichladdich. Is that really, you know, singular to Bruichladdich, or are there other distilleries in the region that are actually pushing the envelope on a lot of projects?
Great.
I mean, I think there's a whole generation of them now. I think one of the cool, we asked everybody we talked to this, were they the things that Bruichladdich started doing 15 years ago that were considered outrageous or unprecedented at the time have now become sort of bullet points on how to start your own distillery the right way. And I think that's an incredible testament to sort of the, not just being creative for the sake of being zany, but really sort of mastering your craft and then being creative within that. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that, Adam, this sort of new generation of.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there is that kind of new generation of distillers. There's a lot of kind of new startup distilleries doing some really cool stuff. And over the years, you know, since we've reopened, we've been really open. We've invited people in who, you know, starting off on that journey. They've come over, they've learned how we do it. They know our story. They've seen what we do. And I think, like, we don't do things for no reason. We do things because we believe in it. We do things, you know, again, we have about 50% of our barley is Isla grown barley because we believe that that's good. That's about provenance. It's about authenticity, and it's putting those kind of things into us. You know, that's you know, it's not just a story. We're actually kind of really doing it and actually being transparent, being really open about what it is we do and how we do it. That's I think I've seen a lot more of that in the industry. I see, you know, these days with the young guys, the startup guys who are, you know, and it's passion. I think it's the thing for us. It's passion. It's what we believe in, and you see that with other people. It's their passion. It's their drive. And that's what's coming through in their whiskey. How they want to make whiskey. So it's not just trying to replicate what the big guys do or anything like that. It's actually putting their own personality and their own passion into whiskey, which is, I mean, as you said before, Greg, it's about people. Really, this whole thing. It's all about. That's what whiskey is. It brings people together. So.
Greg, let me ask you, what was your favorite thing that you captured that heartbreakingly ended up on the cutting room floor?
Oh,
as an editor, this strikes close to home.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, not much wound up on the cutting room floor from the Bruichladdich story. You know, I should say this too. Part of the Bruichladdich story became so prevalent in the film because, like, Jim McEwen gave us 8 days of time with him. We really wanted to talk to Rachel Barry as much as we could, but we got 4 hours with her. So, you know, that some of the realities of it made those creative decisions. But I will say the thing that I'm on a bigger picture, the thing that I was bummed didn't make it into the film is we spent an entire day at Springbank.
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
And which is, sort of like going to a museum of whiskey, and it's such an amazing place. And it was, we loved being there. And what we've done, I will say this, we haven't released it yet, but we did take all the footage that we shot at Springbank and made a little sort of side piece that's like a little 8-minute standalone film just about Springbank.
Yeah. Is it called Springbank, the beginnings of Japanese whiskey?
You know what it's called? It's called Same as It Ever Was.
Oh, nice.
But that was on a bigger picture. That was a really, really tough thing to chop down. That was very, very difficult. I will say on the Bruichladdich side, personal Jim side, the one thing we cut out is Jim moved to Glasgow to learn blending, and we had a whole scene about that where he was talking about blending and learning how to blend and standing on the back of a truck and blending or nosing hundreds of whiskeys a day. And sort of, doing this basic speed challenge of nosing this goes here, this goes here. And that was really cool. We felt like we had everything we needed, to kind of take the story where we wanted to go. So there's two answers, I guess.
Yeah. Adam, you mentioned earlier that you're not necessarily chasing what like the giant distilleries are doing right now. And we recently did an episode talking about the bucket list Scotch. These are the bottles that people would just love to try someday. They're aspirational. They've never had a chance to get it before. And Bruichladdich is one of these distilleries, especially if you're looking for like a black art or, often an Octomore. It's really hard to get your hands on these bottles, at least here in the States. Is that something that you're perfectly okay with, it being, a chore to try and track down a bottle? Or are you guys looking to make it easier and more accessible for people to experience the work that you're doing right now in your...
Well, yeah, yes to both. I mean, I think there are whiskies that we've released in the past that have become, like you say, these kind of holy grails. You think of Octomore, there was Octomore Comus, was aged in a Sauterne cask, and that was beautiful whiskey and is a cult one that that people you maybe come across a bottle somewhere or in a bar somewhere and there's a little bit left in the bottle. You got to taste that. You got to get that whiskey, and that's great. But I think that kind of that's great that people kind of have these amazing memories of tasting that whiskey, and that it's a really kind of symbolic whiskey for them. But I think your other point is really important, that it's about accessibility and it's about doing that. And with Bruichladdich, we're really quite small. We're not producing millions and millions of liters of alcohol every year. We're quite small. Octomore is a really small part of what we do. But what we want to do is kind of grow that and get that out there so that people can taste it. So that people can get introduction to it. They can then start to maybe go into the smaller niche things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's about being accessible. It's about being transparent. And the reason we're making whiskey is so people can drink it, because we think it's delicious. We think it's great. So it's about getting out there for people to taste and enjoy. We maybe make things that the collectors will grab up and all that. But really, you just hope that a few of those bottles of Cokes are coming out. There's a thing we do in Isla when we you open a bottle of whiskey, you go down to someone's house, you take the bottle, Coke out, and you throw the Coke away. You don't need that. You're going to enjoy that whiskey. So
that.
That's kind of what we do. That's what we want to happen.
Well, and that was my question, because it was going to be in the lines of, what is your favorite whiskey that you go back to, and why is it black art?
That's a black art. There's a fair few bottles of that get finished now and again, but my kind of go-to is the Port Charlotte 10-year-old.
Yeah, Rex too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just such a classic one. I've got the 2009 Organic. I managed. It was one of my all-time favorite things I'd ever had up to recently. And I keep trying to track down more bottles of that one anywhere I can find one. So I've got a whole bunch of people who always text me, I found one. So I still have two. So when you're drinking, so when we hang out at a distillery, we're not sitting around drinking our own whiskey all the time. But one of my favorite things is that we have access, because we do independent bottling, like signatory style. So we do independent bottlings of of the craft distilleries here in the U.S.
Yeah.
We call that series the Alliance series, and right now it's mostly Texas distilleries. So right now at the distillery, we got Balcones and Devil's River and 4 or 5 other Still Austin, Treaty Oak. So when I'm hanging out at happy hour, one of my favorite things is to be drinking all my friends' whiskeys.
Yeah.
And just going, man, they make great whiskey. Our friends make great whiskey. And then texting photos of it. What is your favorite thing to drink that's not Bruichladdich? What do you look forward to exploring and trying?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, God, again, you think about the distilleries around Scotland, there is some absolutely amazing stuff. Mm-hmm. I would kind of, if it wasn't Bruichladdich, I'd probably tend to go just a little bit wider, but still stay on Isla. There's some cracking stuff at Ardbeg. I like a bit of Ardbeg now and again. And Bunnahabhain, again, is another one. Some really, really good. Bunnahabhain's kicking out some of the peated Bunnahabhain. The Bunya is absolutely delicious. So, but I think you go wider afield. I don't think, if I was to go into a bar, and order up any kind of Scotch whiskey, it's going to be good. And it's going to be great to experience and to get it, to start kind of looking at what the other distilleries are doing, start thinking about those flavor profiles, what it is they're doing with casks and all that kind of stuff. It's great, but I'll be honest, I don't drink a huge amount of whiskey that's not Bruichladdich, Port Charlotte, or Octomore.
Nice.
So I have a question. It may be a little bit too technical and nerdy, but beyond just like the philosophy and the approach and the spirit that you're approaching, the whiskey creation with, I'm very curious as to, because we just got our new still fired up in the production process, I'm curious as to what is the most eye-opening, hands-on moments of epiphany that Jim gave to you that you think, oh, that was a big deal when it comes to actually making the whiskey, not so much just the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, in terms of that kind of technical thing, I didn't really have much to compare against. So what Jim was teaching me, it was a blank canvas. When I was kind of learning, the mashing or distillation, in the early days, and running the stills and all that kind of thing, you were just kind of doing it the way they were supposed to. But the way you were taught, it wasn't. Well, I used to do it this way. Now you want to do it this way. It was all new to me at the time. But I think what Jim would always do, it was always simple. And it was about taking time, so I think Bruichladdich, again, we're not making huge amounts of whiskey, we're not pushing the process, we're working in the Victorian distillery, so it was about taking time, getting a nice long fermentation, it was about actually running those stills slowly, not filling them to the neck and getting them full through as fast as you could. It was about slow distillation, it was about texture, creaminess in the spirit, and these kind of really simple ways of checking that and tasting it. That was one of the things actually was tasting at all the different stages of the process. You look at the feints coming through, you the waste part, but you would never taste that, but you don't want to taste that. Get an idea of what that is, what flavors are coming through at that point. It was all these kind of things. I think that the big stuff was blending actually, because what we were doing with casks and think about Black Art and the kind of the journey and the story some of these casks have been on and kind of been recast and blended and recast. And that courageousness, I think, was one of the great things I picked up from Jim. It was about taking risks. It was about watching and learning and you try something new and you don't know what's going to happen. You pay attention to it and you see how it develops, and then you can use that to inform what it is you want to do next. So, again, I can't, kind of begin to describe how lucky I am to have the opportunity to work for Jim, alongside Jim, and then take over from Jim. But there was just so much, but it was about confidence. It was about doing the right thing. It was about provenance. It always made sense. Simplicity. There was a lot of kind of fundamentals in there that I take forward today.
Yeah, the signal that I keep getting from you guys is, things like we're going to take it slow and we're going to experiment and take creative risks. It sounds like you guys are in a very enviable position to where you aren't beholden to the bottom dollar. We have to maximize profits. We have to maximize output. It sounds like, you guys have a situation and you have a team where you're allowed that breathing room, that space to really focus on doing it right. and not worry too much about doing it quickly just so you can sell more and more bottles.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, look, we're a company, we're a business. There's a lot of mouths to feed here. This distillery supports, about 100 people, directly at the distillery and the kind of Glasgow. We keep all the finance guys in Glasgow, so they don't know how much we're spending until it's spent.
That's a good call.
Across the three guys at Glasgow, and there's basically 100 people here. So we're a business. We have to operate, but it's more than that. It's about the principles and fundamentals, say, and like you say, having that opportunity to make whiskey, to do it slowly, do it the right way. One, this Victorian distillery, it has to be run slowly. It has to be looked after. It has to be cared for. So we can't push it. But again, it's about making whiskey properly. If you're looking at the process to make, I mean, to give you an example, when you look at this whiskey and it's lovely classic here, you look at the color, you look at the legs, and there's no artificial color in there. It's beautiful. There's natural filtration. It looks fantastic. Then you nose it. You get those lovely aromas, and there's peach and vanilla and toffee and caramel. Beautiful. And at no point when you taste this whiskey, at no point are you thinking, God, that smells so efficient. That smells so. I reckon that's £1.50 a litre. That's fantastic.
The shareholders must be so pleased.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not thinking about it. We're making the whiskey. It's about making an amazing whiskey, and the rest of that takes care of everything else.
I have a friend who always used to give a tasting note, and he always go, it smells like the middle class. I don't like it.
I know the friend you're talking about. Yeah. He is very posh.
I have a certain. I have a nerdy question that's a two-part. You can wave past you if you like. But when we're blending here, which is one of the main things that we do, we always refer to blending as building a house of cards. Very carefully compiling and stacking and developing things, but there's always a point when you're exploring your first round of blending on any project where you add one card too many in the wrong direction and the whole thing collapses. And I mean that in a visceral, your next sip, it tastes like flat soda. Like it just flattens out, and all that nuance and subtlety you were stacking and interlocking just comes down crashing into this monotone flat note. Have you experienced that?
I do. I know what you mean. Yeah, sometimes you can. Yeah, you add something, and you want to. You know what that kind of cask or that style is bringing, and you want to get a little bit more, and you push it too much, and it takes the balance out of everything. So, yeah, it does happen. But again, that's the whole point, I suppose, of doing the blending and making sure that you go through that process so that you don't just fire all the cask together and go, oh, shit,
Yeah, you don't just dump barrels and hope for the best. Yeah. But. So here's my second question, because I asked this of everybody I know who blends. Have you ever been able to repair a blend that went flat? And if so, how?
Well, I can't give away too many secrets here.
Because I haven't figured it out yet.
It's just the board of us, isn't it? It is just the board of us. So maybe I could. But, no, I mean, you again, I think sometimes, you go down a road like that, it doesn't work out. I would usually stop, all right, let's go back again, but, for anything.
Yeah, that's what we do as well. I'm always wondering, though, because at first I would try to add something new and be like, let's see if we can drag it back out, but then it absolutely doesn't work. So now we dump and start over. But I keep thinking there's something I'm missing.
Well, if you figure it out, let me know.
So, Greg, circling back to the water of life, as somebody who's produced for years, there's always this idea for what you're trying to make. And what you end up making very often is going to be pretty different. It's going to, opportunities and limitations. How close were you to making the thing you had in your head? And the second part is, what has been the most surprising thing about people's reaction after they watch The Water of Life?
Those are two great questions. It's pretty close. I will say I had 100% creative freedom. No one told me I could or couldn't do anything. I was able to do and tell the story I wanted to tell. I mean, obviously there's a team of us. Everyone's opinion matters, but I was really kind of given a long leash by Trevor and by the team. And I think that really at the end of the day, we all were on the same page from the beginning. So it was easy to get to the same page at the end. And I've come up with a metaphor recently that is a very whiskey apropos metaphor, which is, I feel like making a documentary, if you're doing it right, is like a single cask whiskey. where there is a point where you have to just to step back. You're not going to blend. You're just going to step back and you're going to trust the wood's going to do its work. It's going to be there. You have everything you need. You've done everything right. You're going to let it go. And I think we had the right team and everything. So I think that the story evolved for sure. You know, I would have never gone to spend a full day at Springbank if I knew I wasn't going to use the footage. If I would have never, you know, gone to a couple other places that we went if I wasn't going to use most of the footage. We used lots of little bits of stuff, but, you know, so that changed and, you know, clearly it grew. But I also think that, you know, there were two moments in the movie, and I don't want to give anything away because I know a lot of people seeing this haven't seen the movie yet, but there were two moments in the movie when I knew those 2 points were the tent poles that were going to hold up the entire movie. And Adam was very key to one of those 2 tent poles. And I will say that we finished our main interview with Adam. I walked away in the warehouse with our cinematographer, Brad, and I said, we got it. That's the movie. That's what sets this in motion. I get it. Now I need to find the other thing. And then we found that. And I will say what I can say without giving it away is it's the moment of handoff of master to apprentice.
Yeah.
It was from Jim's mentor, his journeyman to him, and then from Jim to Adam. And those 2 moments to me, the entire film kind of hung like cloth off of that, like clothes on a clothesline. Those were the 2 posts we needed.
So I want you to answer Rex's second question because I really loved that one. But that reminds me of, there was a weird overlap when I watched the film of like, I kept thinking of Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Oh yeah, Jiro.
Yeah, where it was that same, wrapped around that same kind of story of his son and the father.
Yeah,
right?
I think Adam's got it more put together than the
son did.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair comparison?
Not only would I say it's a fair comparison, you have no idea how apropos that is. We literally used that as a creative touchstone. We wanted to tell that kind of story. We said our whole team internally always was like, that's the film. My son is a Cub Scout. We went on a hike with the Cub Scout pack. One of the moms, her kid was on the pack. And we were hiking, and I said to her, I'm trying to make a film. It's kind of a Jiro Dreams of Sushi, but about whiskey. And she said, oh, the guys who edited that live next door to me, because that's a very LA thing.
Of course, it's LA.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she introduced me to the post-production team from Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which now make Chef's Table. It's the same creative team.
Right on, yeah.
So then we reached out to them, and they became a big part of the film. We 2 of the key post-production people from Jiro were one of them was like sort of a story advisor, and one of them was one of our 2 editors.
Wow.
Well, damn.
And so we unapologetically, we're huge fans, and that's what we wanted to do. And so, yeah.
Very cool.
All right, now, what was your second question?
So basically, what's the thing that when the people watch it that they're taking away from it that you think, yeah, I made something really good? What's the most surprising, fun thing that people leave with after they watch The Water of Life?
Hold on 1 second. There you go. I am switching cameras. My other camera is about to die. Okay. Even though I started with a full battery, so I just switched to another camera here. I hope that's all right.
All good.
One of the things that people tell us all the time is that they're surprised in a good way that the film isn't really about whiskey. It's about people. And, I think that the people really have cottoned on to the sort of idea of the story of generations, an ancient craft that has a very modern footing. And that's really, to be honest with you, that's one of the things that clicked for us with Bruichladdich, which was, Adam is a master of an ancient craft. Adam is a black belt in Kung Fu, but he's practicing his own martial art now, and so I really reacted to that. And I think the audience has. And it's funny watching, sometimes we've done a few of these events where people watch, we do a Zoom at the beginning and then they watch the movie. Yeah. And some people always leave their cameras on while they're watching the movie, which is, we beg them to turn it off because it's really creepy to watch people watch a movie. And I try not to, but a couple times I've gotten to the point where I can see them watching the movie and I can tell what scene they're watching. Especially there's like a handful of scenes. I'm like, oh, I know what they're watching right now. And I'll look at the clock and I'm always right.
Say, Dan, let's put the code back up on the screen here. If the MB is in the live stream, if you're in the live stream and you want to check out The Water of Life, there you go. There's the URL, and you know what? Let's remember to put the link in the description of the live stream after we're done to send people to wateroflife.com/blah blah blah. Yeah, good stuff.
I also can tell you, Rex, one of our producers is in the chat on the live stream, and I know he wrote to me. He's been answering people's questions in the chat. So people have questions.
Good.
Yeah. So just in a few moments, guys, we're going to open it up for the Q&A for you guys to be asking Adam and Greg anything you want about the Water of Life, about Bruichladdich.
Boxers or briefs.
We just really quick, Dan, did we have a clip of a moment that it was Jim and Adam, and there was that handoff moment? I haven't seen the clips yet. Do we have one of these? Yeah, let's play a clip here. Here's a sample of the Water of Life. Here's something that was behind the scenes. This is like a special. This is bonus footage, or is this actually in the film? Something
this is bonus footage.
Bonus footage. All right, so this isn't even going to be in the film. Let's see what we got.
My name is Adam Hannett, and I'm the head distiller at Bruichladdich Distillery. My title was an interesting thing in relation to taking over from Jim McEwan, master distiller, decades of experience in making whiskey. For me, stepping into those shoes, there was a lot of people watching, a lot of people seeing that, so I had to be honest about it, and for me, I didn't feel like I could walk up and say, yeah, I'm a master distiller too, because I'm taking over from someone who's a whiskey legend. I suppose I'm a good example of Jim's legacy, where he's created an opportunity for people in Isla where you can fulfill your potential. When somebody gives you the opportunity, you want to prove that you made the right decision. You've got to have experience. You've got to put that into practice. To be in the same bracket as Jim McEwan, you've got to earn that. Cheers.
A beautiful man, Adam.
Did you see the size of the pour that he's got there? In that shot?
I'm like, good God. I'm just going to discover this.
I don't want to waste it, so just a very small pour. I don't want to have it too much. That was a very small pour.
Let me test out this 200 milliliters of whiskey in a glass.
And just one final question for Adam before we open it up to everybody else. For you to step into the shoes of that kind of legacy, that is a tremendous amount of pressure, I'm sure. But what did that ramp up process look like? At what point did you know, yeah, I'm going to be the successor? At what point was he training you specifically to be the head distiller?
It's a good question, Rex. Looking back on it now, there wasn't really a big moment where he said, right, you're training to take over from me. It was just, come on, help me do this. So let's learn some more about that. It was a kind of a gradual process. And a few months before Jim retired, we would always sit in the morning, before kind of work started. So, we'd come in about 7, have a cup of tea, myself and Jim and Alan and Duncan, and, have a kind of set up for the day. And one day Jim came in Monday morning, sat down and said, boys, I've got something to tell you. I'm retiring. And it was just bang like that. It just happened. It was quite a shock. And then a few months later, he was gone. We walked in Monday morning and he wasn't there. So there wasn't a huge amount of time to kind of prepare and think about it, in that kind of way. But he wouldn't have walked away. I mean, he would say, like, oh, I'm not walking away from this. This is a company, a distillery that he'd kind of brought back to life. And the fact that he'd left Alan Logan, who is a production director, and myself in charge, it was kind of passing that back on to us and working on. So it was a huge responsibility, and it's something I still feel. And I saw Jim yesterday, and when he started, he had some visitors with him, and he was telling stories and all these kind of things. It's a huge part of his life and his story, getting this place, this distillery back up and running. And just the way he talks about it, and, he's obviously happy to walk away and leave us to do it. It's a huge privilege, as I say, a huge privilege to be able to follow in his footsteps.
Well, very cool. Everything that I've been able to see from a distance, it seems like you're stepping into those shoes with humility and grace, and I have no doubt that you are building a legacy of your own. So we, as huge fans of the distillery, are very eager to see what comes next. At this point, Daniel, I think we should open it up to the chat room. What do you think?
I agree.
All right. in the chat room, you guys. Let's do some Q&A. Let's get the questions. Let's see what you guys want to know about the film, about the distillery, about Daniel's rugged good looks.
Yeah.
All right, got a lot of familiar names.
Like all
here.
these people with hair on this live stream with me instead of making it. It's fine. Fine.
You put the hat on. That's fine. A lot of familiar names. We got Terry Dolan's in there. Nice. Terry Dolan says, this isn't a question. I just want you to know that I've been adding hidden Bruichladdich propaganda to the group banners during dry weeks.
Yeah, it's true.
Not sorry.
Oh, this is a real question I saw in there. Let me go back. Well, because I had a version of this. Runaway Rick said, "Will an American ever rise to a legendary status in global whiskey?" I think that's already happening.
Okay.
But what do you guys think about that? I mean, because right now, all the legends of whiskey, they do seem to be Scottish or
basically
Irish.
the question is, we think America's a big deal. Do you think we're a big deal? And if so, tell us how we're a big deal.
Yeah. No. Because we're still young in certain categories of the whiskey that the legends are going.
Yeah.
So, ready, go.
I think, the American whiskey is a huge influence. You know, you think about like Westland, for example. You know, they're doing amazing stuff out there. They're really kind of setting a flag in the ground and doing some amazing stuff. And again, as I said before, I don't think it's as much about different countries and things now. It's about just great distilleries, amazing people making amazing whiskey all over the place. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the boundaries are kind of blurring a little bit. I think, you know, it's less about, you know, American is good, you know, Irish is not as good, Scotch is the best, and, you know, I mean, maybe I would think that, but I'm biased, you know. So, but I think there's something out there for everyone, you know, in every category. Everything is different. That's the beauty of it, I think.
It'd be hard to imagine, though, if you've taken this flight to Scotland and you've traveled to Isla and you walk into this distillery and you're in Scotland finally and you meet the master distiller and it's some dude with a Jersey accent. That'd be a real letdown.
I don't know. I think if you if you're from Jersey, you come to Isla and meet a guy who runs the place with a Jersey accent. You know, that's not a problem. That's quite good.
We got Michelle Debole. Adam, what is the favorite part of your job?
Oh man, that's a question. There's many cool things, like getting to do this with you guys. That's a pretty cool thing, isn't it? I think being able to tell the story of what it is we do is one of my favorite things, because, you know, I joined the distillery when I was kind of 19, 20. I'm considerably older than that now, and it's been a huge part of my life. I've had like this amazing opportunity, and you know, I've seen so many other people have these amazing opportunities, and the benefit that it's brought to Ireland and here, and being able to tell that story and being able to, you know, get a really good dram into people's hands and be able to share it with them, and you know, just watch people enjoying what it is that we do, because at the end of the day, this is our job. You know, this is have so many people interested in what it is we do. You know, prepared to part with their hard-earned cash to enjoy a dram of what we do, and people travel the world, you know, come to Bruichladdich to see what we do. It's a huge compliment. You know, I think it makes me really proud. I think it makes the team here really proud that you know, what it is we do around the world love. So that's maybe one of the best bits.
We have Tim Reig. How close do the Isla distilleries work with each other? Is there a lot of collaboration, or is it basically teams doing their own insular things?
Yeah, I think it's more insular. I think these days. I mean, there's big companies. It's Diageo. There's Remy Country with ourselves. There's Beam Suntory. There's big companies running these distilleries, and they don't necessarily need to you know, to be interacting with each other in any great way. Yeah. I mean, on this island, there's 3,500 people, so we pretty much know each other, and you know, I think, you know, being on this island again, if we get cut off by a storm in the winter and somebody needs some yeast, you know, we're gonna help each other out and do that kind of thing. Or I remember speaking to Colin Gordon, who he's the manager of Bad Beg. He was the manager of Lagavulin a few years back, and I was looking for some help with something, so I went down to see him. He showed me around, told me what it is they do. Brilliant. You know, there's so in that kind of way, everyone's very, very open and very helpful with each other. Yeah, that's kind of the Isla way, you know. But in a grand scheme of things, each distillery is unique. It's doing their own thing, and I think we're all confident in our own ability to make whiskey in our own way, in our own style. So less collaborative, I think, but more helpful.
Master Matt AZ, he asked, is there any plans to do a heavy sherry-influenced Bruichladdich?
Well, we have this fantastic, well, there you go, there's one there like Greg's drinking, there's a great relationship we have with Fernando de Castilla, which is a fantastic bodega in Spain, down in Lareza, and we have some tremendous, absolutely beautiful casks coming in. In fact, there's some coming in a few weeks. There's I probably shouldn't say too much, but we do have some upcoming releases. Maybe not Bruichladdich, Charlotte, or not. That's some beautiful Oloroso casks. So there's plenty of things tucked away in the warehouse there with some absolutely awesome casks. So patience. We'll get there. We'll get it out to you soon.
A Dram for All says, will we see an Adam Hannett specific release? Basically, a bottle with just your giant face on it, and
hopefully not. Hopefully, we want to get people drinking whiskey, not put them off it for life. So, I think I obviously, as head distiller, I have the final say in what it is we're doing with each blend. And when we think about at least the classic here, we make it in batches. So each kind of batch individual, it's about 80 casks worth in each batch. They're relatively small batches.
Mm-hmm.
So each one is kind of going to be unique and reshaped each way, and depending on how casks and flavors are kind of coming together. Again, these kind of blends we were talking about before. So I suppose in a way they all are now since Germans retired.
Not a question, just a comment from Daniel Engelkinjon. I had some Octomore at a whiskey tasting a couple of weeks ago, and it made me go from hating peat to loving peat. Yeah, right on, man.
I hear that a lot. As a matter of fact, in our school, the whiskey marketing school, in the SOM program, we have one of our instructors who teaches on American and bourbon, and she's a pretty kick-ass person in the bourbon industry and doesn't like Scotch at all, and particularly dislikes peated Scotch. However, about a year ago, she texted me a photo from a tasting of a bottle of Octomore. And was like, I think I might be changing my mind. And it turns out that Octomore is what took her from not liking Scotch to like, all right, maybe I could like, which is not at all the gateway I would have imagined from a bourbon drinker. But that's not the first time that I've heard that. Have you heard that before, where Octomore is so peated and so meaty that it sort of blows through the doors to the other side of some alternate reality and captures people?
Many a time have I heard that story with Octomore, and honestly, Octomore is, if you look at Octomore, it's cash strength. It's like 60% alcohol. Most of the expressions we do, about 5 years old. The ppm, the phenol content is through the roof. I mean, it's 80 plus. We've had stuff like 300 ppm. If you just think about those numbers, that's undrinkable whiskey. So that puts a lot of people off. But all you have to do is just let a drop of that touch. Once that passes the lips, and you realize actually it's an experience, it's a moment where you start to realize actually more to this whiskey than just those numbers. It's about amazing flavor, amazing texture, that mouthfeel, about that amazing finish, the way the peat just goes and goes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It changes people's opinion of what peated whiskey is. It really, really does.
Right on. IB Crazy says, what are some of the oldest barrels Bruichladdich has on the shelves? And are any of these older barrels experiments that you're waiting on just to see what it turns into?
Yeah, so we've got, when the distillery opened in 2001, we bought quite a lot of stock that had been laid down years ago. And most of those old casks have kind of gone now. When the distillery was reopened, there was a few from the 1970s, and not many. A few from the 1970s, one or two from the 80s. So probably the kind of the oldest stock we've got a kind of a decent amount of is I say decent amount, is a couple of hundred, maybe the 1989, and maybe a few from the early 90s here and there as well. But those old stocks are really kind of gone now. So that's what 30 plus year old whiskey, and they're probably less experimental now. We've done work with them in the past, and we've worked with the wood, made sure we've got the best possible quality in there. We're making sure that that's at that age, we're not getting too much wood, not doing too many crazy things. That spirit is all that needs to be kind of respected and looked after in a kind of gentle kind of way. So less experimental, but we do have these beautiful little parcels.
Nice.
Oldest,
Well,
yeah.
You have a question?
Well, we have Brianna snuck a question in. Okay, it's not.
not
Okay.
an
All right. So,
All right. So my question
Well-
came from Terry Dolan, though.
well, first, there's two questions for Greg, though.
Okay.
First, what are you drinking? And second, how much did the whole, COVID situation influence the process of making the movie?
What I'm drinking is the Bruichladdich Valinch from the virtual festival this year. Waiting for my camera to snap focus. There we
it
go,
goes.
with Mr. Adam Hannett on the bottle.
Hey, you did put your mug on a bottle.
Hey, a vest. Nice.
Mercifully in cartoon form. This is a 17-year-old sherry cask, Fasciel 2021, single cask Isla single malt Scotch whiskey, distilled in 2003, 17 aged years in a second fill sherry butt. And I will tell you, it is delightful.
Nice.
And yes, I mean, look, we did not set out to make a film that we were going to release into the jaws of a global pandemic, but
yeah.
nobody expected the Spanish Inquisition. So,
I see what you did there.
It certainly, we had some plans. We were going to release the film. The film was ready, and we were going to release the film on Isla during the festival. But that wasn't meant to be. And so we kind of readjusted, and fortunately we had everything shot. We had everything in the can. It was just a matter of editing. It was most of it by that point was done digitally. Our editor and I were the only two that sort of had to breach any COVID walls with each other. And most of that was even done digitally. And he would leave hard drives on the porch, and I would pick them up, and I would leave hard drives for him. And then he's a huge whiskey nerd, and he would leave me whiskeys with the hard drive and vice versa. So we never saw each other except through windows. But yeah, so we've been doing these. We've been doing online release of the film, and that's the new world. And people ask all the time, when is the film going to be on a streamer? And it will absolutely be on a streamer, but not yet. What we're doing right now is what would have been like a theatrical showing. We were going around to art house theaters and film festivals and whiskey festivals around the world. So now we're just doing it online. In November, we're hoping to do a bunch of, we started doing a couple in-person screenings now. We just did a few in my hometown in Pennsylvania last week. We're hoping to do a bunch in Taiwan coming up. So we're going to do some in Japan. But bit by bit, we're going to go more traditional. So we're just kind of rolling with the punches like everybody else.
I feel you, man. Jeremy Brown, you got one?
No, I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had this question on my list.
Yeah.
When you guys, Adam, when you guys are measuring ppm, are you measuring that on the malt or the new make?
That's in the malt, yeah. So
that's measuring the peat.
Yeah, traditionally that's what we do in the industry here in Scotland. They measure it in the malt, and that's kind of what we would always do when we talk about the ppm. It's always been in the malt. We do measure it through the process as well. But
are your cuts fairly much the same consistent points on each of those runs, even with the different malt levels of smoke?
Say again, sorry.
While your cuts effectively consistent as well on each of those runs, so that you're differentiating, you're still capturing that difference. Does that make sense? Because
it does. Yeah. So,
I only asked this because we do peated malt, and you can cut that smoke out, right? If you cut too high,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, that's kind of, I suppose, it's a perfect example of, like we were talking about the optimal before. It could be the most heavily peated, crazy thing, but actually, it doesn't have that huge kind of level of power and phenols. It's because we're keeping that same cut. When we cut our still super clarity shell and Octomore, it's the same, because that gets us the quality of spirit.
Right.
And that's the most important thing. And it's where the phenols fit in there, and where they come through in the process that kind of dictates that. So, so we keep the cuts the same pretty much all the time. And we're not distilling to make Octomore like super heavy peated and get all those phenols through and all those glycols and all those things that give it. It's about the balance, it's about the style, and just seeing where those phenols come through. So
good. I've wondered that for years. Actually, I'm glad I got to ask that.
Jeremy Brown, this is for Adam. As I enjoy the Port Charlotte 10, how do you go about enhancing recipes that are already amazing?
Well, it's interesting because I think the recipes. I think by even kind of using that word recipe, it's like there has to be consistency. You have to repeat. It has to be the same. You have to follow that recipe. There's always that evolving, kind of changing kind of thing. So, for example, we talked about the Port Charlotte 10. It's not identical. It's not exactly the same each time. the historical filling patterns, historical volumes we made have been up and down and changed. That experimental thing, we were kind of figuring out in the early days. We're bottling that whiskey now, so there will be changes, and I'm absolutely okay with it. As a distillery, we want to kind of evolve and change. We don't want to go a million miles away from that flavor profile of what the Charlotte 10 is, because it's beautiful. But you taste a bottle of Charlotte 10 that we make today and one that we made a couple of years ago, they'll be relatively different. They won't be identical. You'll be able to distinguish between the two. And that's part of what we want to do, and that's part of that changing that mentality of what was tradition and about doing everything the same, maintaining everything, fighting against nature to make sure you've got consistency and flavor at all costs. This is about actually working with nature, working with the cask, working with the barley, and developing and changing and evolving through to make just beautiful whiskey that is expressing itself in the right way rather than controlling it.
Love it. I'm good.
Adam has got to the point he has released whiskey. He has so the whiskey that you have distilled entirely on your own. At what point does that start to come out?
I say entirely on my own, but
there's a team.
A team of Bashman and Stillman and
you didn't send everyone home and run the whole distillery single-handedly for a week.
Very diplomatic of you, yes.
So some of the Optimos will have done. We've, so again, there was a point, I think back in 2016 where we released some 10-year-olds where I had been kind of mashing and distilling that spirit, and then when I'd kind of progressed through to blender master to distiller, I was obviously selecting the casks, and it was me that was kind of made it and then bottled it. But with the Optimos that they're coming through now that we're making again at 5 years, that's something that again I will have been overseeing that kind of distillation process and coming
very
in the
cool.
bottle. So
Nice. One final question. Oh, it disappeared. It was super good and interesting. Oh,
that was probably the best question
No.
the last time.
Do you have just a go-to whiskey whenever you're not even thinking about it? That's the one that I'm going to be putting in my glass. It's just kind of a favorite pet that you keep reaching for.
Put Charlotte 10-year-old every time. That's the one that.
Yeah.
I actually do have a question as well, just to Greg. Greg, it's just a question of the royalties.
Well, and as long as we're getting awkward about it, I know Daniel had reached out multiple times. He really wanted to be interviewed for The Water of Life.
Oh, yeah.
But Greg kept saying, no, you can't be in it. I can't.
Yeah. I even went to his house. As a matter of fact, one of those times there was whiskey on his porch. That was me. But there was already a hard drive there. So I was like, oh, this must be a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
So
just to give some quick context, before the live stream started, we were talking with Greg, and there was a point where he wanted to interview Daniel for The Water of Life, but it was an either or. He had a choice to make. What was the choice you had to make, Greg?
I had a choice of going to Austin and spending 2 days with Daniel, or going to Australia and spending 8 days with Jim McEwen at the distillery he was getting set up there. And
betrayal.
So,
you made the right choice.
No, you made the right choice.
You definitely made the right choice.
Yeah.
I'm coming to Austin. I promise.
Do it.
And
If
I'll
you
bring
had
samples of
simply-
whiskeys
no.
and hard drives.
Here's where you made your mistake. If you had simply told me about that problem, I would have gone to Australia and held camera gear.
Yeah.
And then we could have killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Well, while we're airing past situations and
grievances.
interactions, I want to make a plea to Adam actually for something.
All right.
I've done a bunch of these events, and people often ask me my favorite Bruichladdich. And so Bruichladdich, as you may know, and a lot of distilleries do it now, but have a distillery-only Valencias. And there's a Valencia at Bruichladdich always has two, a Port Charlotte and a Bruichladdich. We happened to go there, and there was one, and I bought it, and it was MNC 2005. It was a Port Charlotte, and there's something about this whiskey that speaks to me on a weird level. Every time I drink it, I dream about it that night. And I've told a bunch of our friends that, and the whiskey fabric is awesome. And even though once that cask is gone, it's gone. I have 3 bottles of it because two other bottles have been gifted to us, one by our producers and one by our friend in Germany, Udo. And now it's gone. And I want Bruichladdich to sell this whiskey so everybody can dream about my dream whiskey. Although they might invade my dreams, it might backfire.
Sounds very psychedelic, man.
Yeah, this is Inception level shit.
It is an incredible red wine finished Port Charlotte, and there's something about the dance of the smoke and the wine cask, and I'm telling you, it's just magic. So I always want to lodge these little moments here. MNC 2005.
So while we're putting in requests, I mean, Adam, if you can just send all of the prototype whiskeys that you're experimenting with to us,
Yeah.
for our input, that would be great.
Blend it to blender. We can go backwards and forwards in a few of these things. Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. We thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It's a really great film, The Water of Life. If you guys are at all interested in Scotch and Bruichladdich and just how things work in an iconic, legendary distillery like that, definitely check it out. Anything else before we head off, gentlemen?
Well, for me, I just want to say, boys, thank you very much for having us. Again, always a pleasure to share the screen with Greg and chat about some, it's incredibly flattering to have you guys chat away and about all the things that we do here. So thanks again for having us, and Slàinte.